And good afternoon and welcome. My name is Ryan Belmore. I am the owner and editor of What's Up Noop, and we are here today. This is our one-on-one series where we have a conversation, get you some more information, tell you about some more resources, and answer some of your questions. Joining me today is our news editor, What's Up Noop news editor, Frank Prosnitz is going to be joining me today for this conversation, and Frank is here as well. And Frank, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Frank, there you are. I'm doing well. How are all
we got
things?
Matching hats. How about that?
We do have matching hats, and we'll have to get one for the lieutenant governor. And Lieutenant Governor, that's it. He is our guest today, and Lieutenant Governor. Let's not wait any longer. Dan McKee joins us today, and good afternoon, Lieutenant Governor.
Good afternoon to you guys. Good to be here.
Hi. Good to see you.
Yes.
Now, Lieutenant Governor, you were just on a call for wellness, healthy aging, and long-term care. Anything you can tell us about that call you were just on?
Yeah, it was made up of the people who do in-home care, like you say, nursing homes, and I thought the conversation, which is actually continuing right now, was very interesting. I mean, they are clearly talking about how the virus, the COVID-19, is impacting nursing homes. They gave a relatively good report in terms of where we stand and the work that's being done and the testing that's going on. One of the interesting points I thought was that you hear a lot about the nursing homes being the hotbed for the virus and unfortunately the deaths. Rhode Island is a state that which was reported today that has been able to test into all the nursing homes, all the staff. So I think that is an important metric for all of us because this testing component is a really important one. And also a number of the facilities is also which we've been talking about. That conversation blends on the two of the top priorities in our office. One is long-term health care, and the other one is small businesses. And so the financial impact that this has had on nursing homes. And most of them are for-profit. Some of them are non-profit. Is extraordinary, and that's one of the focuses that gets my attention because I think that we need to really step it up for our small businesses right now in a way that hopefully it's going to happen on the state level and the local level, in addition to what's happening federally.
Are we doing enough screening of staff at the nursing homes?
Yeah, that was the point, Frank. I think that is one that they don't feel is out getting enough. Is that we're a state that has the testing capacity and is implementing that testing into the staff.
What are you hearing beyond Rhode Island?
Well, only what I'm hearing beyond Rhode Island is that that's not necessarily the case. I mean, Rhode Island, because of, in large part, because of CVS, the leadership coming from Dr. Scott, the health department, the governor's office, we're positioned. That's one of the reasons I think that we're starting to reopen slower than what some people want, but we are the first New England state to reopen our economy. And the reason is CVS has allowed us to be, on a per capita basis. Just a few weeks back, we had the highest testing capacity of any state in the country. So what's happening other places in other countries on nursing homes, I think that they're late at the game, some states, in terms of really focusing on that, but they are starting to focus on it. But many of them, Frank, do not have the testing capacity on a statewide basis to penetrate in there. The other piece that is still concerning to me is that the PPE, or that personal protective equipment, the masks, the gloves, the sanitizing, in some cases, plastic shields and that type of thing. That we're still rationing that as a state. We're doing the best we can to get that equipment, but we're still rationing. And I would say that a letter that came from the nursing home executive director is still saying that there's he termed it as a critical situation in terms of gowns and other PPE stuff. So I think that where we're doing really well in the testing, I think that we can still do a lot better on some of the protective equipment that our nursing homes need.
Looking forward with the nursing homes, one of the things that I think we know that there are a number of nursing homes where staff is low paid, and often people who will come into work if they're not feeling well because they need that paycheck. What are we going to do, or how can we do anything to try and improve that kind of a situation where they have the appropriate benefits and they have the appropriate wages?
Yeah, so I think that there's been an attempt. I think that we could do a little bit better on it, but I think that there should be some level of, combat pay to a certain degree, as you're suggesting. That should come from the federal government. If it doesn't come from the federal government, we need to kind of make that happen from the statewide. I think that within reason, we need to do that. I think more important, the pay is very important, but more important is to be protecting the safety of the staff, the safety of the people that they're giving care to, which I think that's what we're all looking for, right? I mean, if we can, have confidence that we're safe when we're working, or safe when we're, in a nursing home or any other business, I think that that's our top priority. So just as much as the compensation is important, the top priority is the safety.
Yeah, I guess
Now,
my
Lieutenant-
thought is,
Oh,
yeah,
go
go ahead.
ahead,
I'm sorry, Ryan. Go ahead.
You can follow up with your question.
Yeah. So my thinking is, however convoluted it may be, that if we take care of the foundation, the fundamentals, that when we look forward, that we have people who are going to be better prepared themselves to enter a situation that might be unusual, that they might be in a better position on their own financial status and on their own living conditions, that they don't think twice about when they go into that they'll stay home when they're sick and not bring whatever it is into that kind of facility where you have people who are compromised.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a definite discussion on that in many of directions, not just in the nursing homes, right, Frank? I mean, we know that we have a highly infected Latino population, higher than the percent that they represent in the state. There's reasons for that. So the people, when you get into this type of health pandemic issue, people who are able to stay home are going to have less risk. People who have to work outside of the home are going to be at more risk unless we're very diligent in terms of the safety factors. Right now, Latino population, minority population, 6 times less to be able to work at home like we're doing right now. So we have to be really aware of that. We're all, we hear this a lot. We're all in this together. And in fact, if any particular community is highly infected, and I want to paying special attention to that, whether it's the workers at the nursing homes or the people who are living at the nursing homes, or the Latino population, or the minority population. I'll be having a broadcast like this tonight at 7:00. I'll have the Lieutenant Governor from Michigan, Lieutenant Governor from Delaware on, talking about what's happening on reopening in their states. But we're also, the second half of the show, we'll have some Black community leadership on, and talking about the impact that's having on their community, which is directly related, as you're suggesting, I believe, is into the economics of the families and their ability to choose or not to choose to be working.
Sure.
Lieutenant Governor, you've been hosting videos on social media like this just about every day, if not more than once per day. Q&As, Ask the Lieutenant Governor. Talk about your experience with connecting with voters and businesses in this direction.
So I think there's a huge amount of anxiety in the small business community, Ryan. There's no question about that. And as a small business person myself, and having experienced the roller coaster that we have in Rhode Island, whether it's the banking crisis or the 9/11 crisis or the recent real estate crisis a decade ago, I know I've experienced that pressure. So I would say the top thing that I'm hearing is a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and certainly in the business communities that have been impacted, that have been asked to either shut down their businesses or that have been impacted by some level of opening only at 20% or 30% or 25%, like the restaurants are talking about right now. So there's a lot of anxiety. I think the general public has responded very well in terms of the fact that they are adhering to, as I've always started every call, we need to make that safety as the top priority in our lives right now, and the health safety. Follow the Dr. Scott, follow her office, Department of Health, follow the governor's office, their direction, and I think that I think our general community has done that, and I think we're reflecting that as being reported in our cases that are being reported, and unfortunately the deaths that are being reported. I mean, we're jammed right between New York and Boston area, and both have been hotbeds for this virus. So I think that I think a lot of high anxiety in the small business community, and rightfully so. And I think that a very good, responsible response virtually across the board with the general public. I see it when I'm out, and which I've been basically doing this from home, just like everybody else. But when I'm out, I see a lot of masks being worn virtually almost everywhere. So I think that's an important piece. I think the other issue that you talked about, the calls, the response from people in terms of volunteering that time to try to help people has been phenomenal. And then that's a real reflection on our state, I believe, and the people who live in it. But I've done an international economic ambassador. I've talked to Frank about that, where we have a core group of people who have roots in other countries. We've been using that and meeting regularly with them, talking about shifting from an international point of view, but how can we use our international, relations and networks to help the state of Rhode Island. Two business people that grew up in Hong Kong, 200,000 masks were donated. We're working on another project right now where another 50,000 masks are going to be donated into the municipality. So the generosity has been very high. I do want to single out one particular story in particular, which has to do with the rismallbusiness.org site. So it's rismallbusiness.org. If you go to that site, that developed from my early phone calls, Ryan, where we might have had 30, 40 people on it. We've had as many as 450 people on the phone calls, and now we're shifting to a platform like this where we're reaching 10,000 people at a time. Views a little bit less, but clearly we're penetrating into but 3 individuals that volunteered off that first phone call. They're like an executive nonprofit board that are still running their marketing businesses, but they helped us develop this rismallbusiness.org site. Businesses can either register there that need to kind of sell their gift certificates or sell their services in advance right now, so they can be supported with their customers and all the goodwill they develop. And customers and residents can go and support their small businesses and buy flowers from a flower shop or a restaurant gift certificate, or we bought some candy from a local candy store. Susan and I did my wife Susan and I. So this is an unbelievable site. 1,300 businesses, 100,000 visits so far since we've opened it up. Over $100,000 of in-kind contributions coming from local media, whether it's WPRI or the signs on the highways, Lamar sign, and other ways. So I think that the generosity of the general public, and this is an extraordinary effort by some small businesses to help all small businesses in the state of Rhode Island, and now they're updating that site to be this resource in terms of what reopening looks like, and help coach the businesses through as another resource that the business have in terms of how they reopen. So that's a long answer, but we've been doing a lot of work and meeting and talking to a number of people, helping one-on-one people through the SBA loans and the DLT with the unemployment. So we've been busy. Our office gathers every morning early in the morning, and then from the rest of the day, our staff is out working as hard as we possibly can to help the state of Rhode Island get through this COVID-19 health crisis.
Some chambers have been doing similar type of things on their own websites. Are you coordinating with them?
Yes, and when you go to rismallbusiness.org, you're going to see the North Kingstown Chamber on there. You're going to see the Wesley Chamber on there with their gift program. I was down on the Wesley Springfest concert where the chamber
in Wesley created some funds for PPE stuff for the hospitals and other things. Yeah, so that's a portal not to be like to take over any of the work, but it's to complement the work, Frank. And so you can go right to it, and as you got it posted right now, and there's a whole section. In fact, the chambers, we're really advocating that the chambers need to get some funding. They didn't qualify for the PPP funding as other businesses have, and we're really asking them to be supported. So yes, very supportive of the chambers and anybody that's working, any of the local business association, the Musqueamick Business Association. I'll be on a call with the Warren Business Association after, right after this. But yes, it's a coordinated effort, and we're working with the chambers as well about other strategies that we can help our small businesses as a true partnership.
Projections are nationally that 40 to 45% of restaurants will not reopen. Evan Smith in Newport has used a figure closer to 30%. Either way, that's an extraordinary amount. What are you hearing from the trenches?
Yeah, and I think that again, I think it's a survival mode right now, Frank. In my opinion, and we should be doing everything from a federal, a state. I think the state needs to get a lot more aggressive in a big idea strategy to help these businesses weather the storm. I've been advocating for leveraging state guarantees, taking some of the federal money and putting that into the pot, and then leveraging those dollars out 10 to 20 times with the local banks who have the cash and put favorable loan strategy, grant strategies forward. We haven't seen that yet. It's these small wins of like dining outside. I mean, that's subject to weather. It's subject to, the ability to actually afford to be able to do the setup. I'll be talking to a restaurant later today that is saying, hey, that's great. I can go outside, but how am I going to afford to get the tables, get the, set up, the chairs, all the other things that are required, the lighting or whatever they might have to deal with, right? Where is that money coming from? I think that the state should be creating funding for every small business out there that they have shut down or they've limited their activities, and they should give a percentage strategy to help every business comply with the safety issues and to help them, meet those standards. And one of them is to provide them some money to allow them to do that. But yeah, the restaurants it's a survival mode right now, I think. And that's why I think that a couple of things that I think that I'm not hearing, and I think that we should be doing every municipality in the state of Rhode Island should be building up as much credit as it can through tax anticipation notes or whatever vehicle their financial advisors say. Borrow as much, reserve as much cash as you possibly can, use as little as you need. And I think that would put local communities in a better position to help, help the restaurants, help the small businesses, and the state should be doing the same thing. We should be leveraging as much credit, as much capital out there as possible. One other thing on the restaurants, I think that is really important is that we were able to help them drive the adding the beer and wine, and now the draft beer and the mixed drinks into their, so that they could actually use their inventory in a way where they could, convert that inventory to cash, which they need. So anyways, we should be supporting these small businesses in a way that I haven't heard that we are yet, but I'm going to keep on pushing until I hear a plan that is sustainable, because when small amounts of money come out, Frank, it's exhausted immediately. The other piece I would tell people though right now, that PPP loan, the small business loan, there's still $100 billion available to our small businesses. So if you haven't applied yet and you think that it would be helpful to you, you should be applying. Are
people getting the money? People who applied, are they getting their money?
They are. They're starting to get that money, and we're reporting that on every call. Mark Haywood is telling us how many applications. I think there's been over over $1 billion of money that has come from the PPP loans that into our local businesses, and that's going to be helpful to help them survive an 8-week time frame. But what's going to happen after that? We should be very aware of the impact that those, if in fact there's a 25-40% failure rate on our restaurants, that means there's going to be a failure rate on our other small businesses. We should be doing everything we possibly can, Frank, to minimize those closures, because if we don't, then the unemployment is going to spike again. It's costly for us to have unemployment. We should be doing everything we can to protect these small businesses right now.
Now, Lieutenant Governor, regarding small businesses, businesses know about their business better than anybody else. I've gotten this question a lot from areas that border Connecticut and Massachusetts, where Connecticut and Massachusetts have set up advisory committees. So they'll have an advisory committee of restaurant owners, advisory committee of spa owners, hotel owners, businesses like that. I just got an alert from Connecticut advisory group that is made up, will participate in a roundtable, and it's hotels to advise how to reopen hotels the right way for everybody. Does Rhode Island have that? Who is advising the governor or your group to what is best for their industry or their business?
Well, I think that we could have been quicker at it, Ryan. I think you're going to start seeing that now that we're reopening. Commerce is providing some communication. My point that I've been making, that's why we've been doing the calls, and at every call I have 1 or 2 panels of small businesses on that, so that they can actually tell their story, so that could be heard, whether they're whatever industry it is, the fitness industry or the golf courses or the beauty salons, and the list goes on and on and on. I would hope that we're not going to just rely on, and again, we just talked to how important chambers are and the voices of these associations. We need to talk to the small business owners themselves, right? They know the anxiety that they're going through. A professional lobbyist or something like that, there's a benefit for them to be involved, but they don't have the same risk. So, for instance, we were lobbying on behalf of the garden shops. The garden shops in our state of Rhode Island were not being allowed to open in a way that Massachusetts was allowed their garden shops to open. So we really pushed hard so that they had hundreds of thousands of dollars of inventory in their garden houses. That if they didn't sell them through the springtime, through the Easter time frame, the Mother's Day, and a few weeks after, they're going to eat all that inventory. They got negotiated, but it wasn't as much as they needed, and so this is not a negotiation like a labor contract negotiation or legislation negotiation where you go in and you try to negotiate and you try to come out with something. One of the people said, on the golf courses, well, because they didn't get, they weren't allowed to have members play that actually live in other states. New Hampshire has allowed memberships to play at their private golf courses, which are businesses who have a large payroll, large overhead. They're responsible in their banquet halls for people who sell cakes, do disc jockey work, on linen on the tables, all that type of stuff. So we can't have any of those fail. But then the comment was, well, you didn't get that, but you got this. No, this is not a negotiation strategy right now. This is flexibility in a space where you can do it safely, and wherever you can do it, we should be doing it. And the only people that really understand how critical this is are the people who I described earlier who have this very high anxiety. So they should be listened to in a way that I don't think they have been up to this point, and I'm hopeful that they will be as we start reopening.
How coordinated are your efforts with the governor's office?
Well, I think I answered that 2 different ways, Frank. One is, that question's being asked a lot of me about, why I'm not at the press conference and that type of thing. It really relates to the way that we're elected, and it's not the current governor and the current lieutenant governor. It's a function of the fact that we don't campaign together, we don't manage together. I'm not part of her management team. She's not part of my management team. So the coordination from that perspective, maybe from the public's perspective, is not that great. But I can tell you that one of the things that we do have, and I've repeated this, Frank, when you've talked to me over and over again, we have direct access to the department heads. So if we need to talk to Liz Tanner at DBR to get a clarification on a question that related to a business, we have direct access to that. We have direct access to DLT. DLT is doing a phenomenal job and actually is ahead of the rest of the country in terms of its work, in particular on sole proprietors, independent contractors, gig economy. Over 47,000 applications come just in that network alone to DLT. we're able to have DLT with Matt Weldon, who's the assistant director, on every one of our Tuesday, Friday calls. And people can type in their questions. They can ask questions. We get back to them. And Matt has been able to help many, many people. So I think from the press conference point of view, and the absence of me there, it's, I haven't had a conversation with the governor on these issues. I haven't had a direct conversation with the governor since this crisis started, but I've had direct conversations with their staff. So just because I haven't been included in that public presence, it doesn't mean that our office is not doing the heavy lifting that we're doing right now to help, the people that we were just talking about.
Lieutenant Governor, people are going to hear that saying, the Lieutenant Governor hasn't talked to the governor in 8-10 weeks. What should they know about that? Is that okay? Is it normal?
I just explained that I think that it's the governor's call, that I'm advocating what I would say long-term, go change our Constitution. You see Governor Polito and Lieutenant Governor Polito of Massachusetts with Governor Baker. They run as a team, they campaign as a team, they manage as a team. The lieutenant governor in Massachusetts was asked to, come up with a reopening plan, dispatched by the governor, speaking on behalf of the governor. We don't have that constitutional setup, Ryan, and I think that people need to know that. And I think that if we've learned something here is that from a governor's point of view, I've stated that I think Massachusetts is far more served by their executive branch of their government than Rhode Island is because of the nature of the way that we elect. But I also want to repeat again that just because I haven't had that direct connect with the governor doesn't mean that didn't stop us from doing the work that we're doing and the extraordinary work that I believe that our office is doing. And we continue to answer the phones every day. We're following up, and I can't underestimate. You should not underestimate the value that we have direct access into the executive branch, their staff. That they're directors. So that doesn't come without the governor's consent. And we have taken full advantage of that. So I think the general public should say, look, you want to have a better operation that I think that Massachusetts has and other states. Iowa has the same thing. Over 24 states actually campaign together and they manage together. Change our Constitution. And the question that the public should know is if there was a need to transition from my office to the governor's office, which there's been like 8 or 9 lieutenant governors since I've been lieutenant governor have become governors in other states. Because of our access to all the different executive branch offices, we know what's going on. So I wouldn't read too much into that other than the fact that, you asked the question and I've answered it.
Okay. I would throw in one last question. You don't have to answer it, but have you had any ability to have any input on the plans that the governor has put forth in terms of reopening? Of all the general officers, you're the one who has had the closest ties with the business community. And so it's that community that is reopening. I would think that your input would be invaluable in helping craft that kind of a program.
So I think that indirectly that's happening, Frank. Directly, we're certainly they certainly are following our calls, are following our conversations, and I think that you're seeing some response to that. Not as much as I would like, Frank. Quite frank, but I think that we are sending messages, and we've made the decision to be very, very visible and very, very outright speaking about it. And I've said this over and over again now in the last few weeks since May 8th. We've transitioned now to a reopening in the state. That priority is getting very close to the health priority being the top priority. We just need to meet, really drive flexibility in that space. We're trying to do that, but we're not in the room where it happens, as that Hamilton play song goes. Being in the room where it happens. We're not. And the way that the general public can put a lieutenant governor in that room is to change the Constitution. I don't think it's not a personal issue at all. It's more of a governance model. And we're doing everything we can to communicate to the decision makers what we're hearing from the small business community.
Lieutenant Governor, when you mention hearing from the small business community, obviously everybody is antsy to get back reopened, but we cannot ignore the fact, and I should have mentioned this much sooner. Yesterday we lost another 18 Rhode Islanders. Yesterday, another 462 Rhode Islanders tested positive for COVID-19. there's got to be that conversation you're having with business owners as well. Is it right to open? Is it safe to open? What is your messaging there as they continue to see some of these numbers go up?
Ryan, I think you're really hitting a very important point. This is not the time to relax. We're going to reopen the economy. We're still going to have the virus with us. The masks, the hand cleaning, the social distancing are all going to be part of that. The businesses, I believe that the businesses are a lot more prepared to deal with this today than they were 60 days ago when everybody thought we were going to go business as usual and just be safe. Look, this is an extraordinary circumstance, and I think that's what we need to continue to deliver that message to the general public. There's never been a time where every public school in the country has been closed. Every university has been closed. The NBA stopped their season. The Major League Baseball is not having their season right now. National Hockey League, all these major institutions have shut down. That's a worldwide issue. So we have to really keep that in mind, what you're talking about, Ryan. This is still a very serious matter. There are states and there are countries that have done it a little bit better than ours. They've responded quicker than we have, but we got to take it from where we are right now. It is still a health crisis, and we need to make sure that that's in every sentence that we have so people don't relax. I was on a call with one of the, I'll just leave it, one of the local community groups, and they were starting to talk about herd mentality, or herd curing, and I had to say point blank, look, if you're listening to CNN or you're listening to Fox News, you are getting a political bent to this story. Go to the people who you would rely on and being experts. We don't have every elementary school and high school and middle school in the country closed down just because this is normal circumstances. So I can't really reinforce that more, Ryan, but I do know that the information that we have is so much stronger that it's going to really drive our behavior than we were at 2 months ago. I was in a restaurant 2 months ago, sitting with the owner side by side, and we were talking about, well, what's the risk here? What's the risk? Today, that same business owner is saying, I'm not going to reopen until I feel as I'm safe. So the mentality is going to drive the behavior. It is totally changing where we are in terms of the information we have right now. But we are going to need to reopen the economy, and where we can do it in a way where, to Frank's point, where we can, help small businesses be able to be in a survival mode right now. We need to do everything we can to make that happen. And part of that, again, I'm going to reinforce, the state has a role in this. The local communities have a role in this, and they haven't quite figured out what that is yet. But I don't think that the conversation has got to a level where the extraordinariness that I think needs to happen. I mean, we gave a ball player in this, that didn't even live in the state of Rhode Island, $100 million or whatever it was. He didn't even know how to run a business. We're in a far more difficult time. We should be putting those type of assets up and then leveraging them out to $1 billion or $2 billion and provide loan strategies that work for businesses that were viable. They're going to be viable if they can continue to survive. And that's the type of work that we need to be doing right now that I don't see yet. And that's what we're going to keep on advocating for. But yeah, the health issue is the top priority right now, Ryan. And we need to be flexible but safe about the way that we reopen our businesses. But I think that there's a need to start reopening so that we, position ourselves so that we can recover quicker as long as we're safe about it.
I wanted to see if we get a perspective on a different issue, but related. So before all of this began, we had a huge effort from one end of the state to the other to rejuvenate the physical structures of our school systems. We had the bond issue of a couple of years ago. We've had local school departments that have come up with different plans. In Newport, they just got a letter that looks like they're moving towards approval of their phase 2, and it's about, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, about 116 million total. and then whatever the state puts in, but then you add debt service. Um, is the state going to be in a position to be able to live up to its end of the bargain, which is probably in Newport looking to a 52% um, uh, stipend, if you will, that includes certain incentives, and to those systems that are in the pipeline but have held back? Um, is there even a glimmer of hope of another bond going out over the next couple of years?
So I think the answer is yes, but I also feel as though that if you don't have a shovel in the ground right now, you should be reassessing what schools might be looking like down the line, right? They're going to look different in terms of the way that we operate. So I would be certainly taking a very close look at, my current plans against the new world that we're going to be living in here. I'm talking about social distancing in our classrooms. I'm talking about, schedules where half the kids come in and half the kids still home on virtual learning, and then flipping it back. I mean, there's going to be some really. You just heard that California, I think, has decided that they're not going to open up their fall semester in the schools until after Thanksgiving or something like that. So yeah. So your point is there. The other point that I think is really important one, Frank, is that's why I'm saying that right now we should be thinking sensibly about budgets, but we also should not be. Money is not really the biggest problem we have. If we go and borrow it, we credit up, we get it out there. I think that one of the things that you're talking about, where if the failure rate of the restaurants is going to be that high, then we should be thinking about how do we reduce that. And I think that part of it is, as I've already mentioned, is to provide money to these businesses so that they can survive. The same thing is going to happen in the local communities. We can't just shut off the faucet on that. That's why, we got to keep on pushing hard to keep going forward. But I think you got to reassess. We're talking to businesses right now that know that their business is not going to be the same. And the ones who recognize that, they're going to structure it differently. I'll just take the fitness centers, for instance. I was in the fitness business for 30 years. The model of having a lot of people in a small space paying a little bit of money, sweating and breathing and doing everything else, that model is not a viable model for the next year or until there's a vaccine, right? So what is the casualty rate there if you don't reinvent yourself? So municipalities should be reinventing themselves. Schools should be reinventing themselves. And I can tell you, Frank, right now, I can't wait. And I'm happy that we're into the reopening strategy, because I've been holding off talking about the impact that this closing our schools is going to have on our state and our economy on the long term. You know that I've been very involved in schools and knowing the fiscal benefit of having schools that are competitive with Massachusetts and beyond. I can't wait to get into that education conversation, because more so than ever, a failed school system in Providence, us not competing in a way where economically we can actually have families earn a good living, as you were talking about earlier in the show. There's a reason why there's a heavy infection rate in the Hispanic community, or the Black community, or the minority community. And a lot of it goes right back to education. And we know that the Hispanic community in the state of Rhode Island has the lowest performing student body in the country. That can't happen any longer. And yet, the schools that I helped start, the mayoral academies, are actually showing that's a myth. And that we schools I've helped open public schools that are number one in the state, and they have a heavy Hispanic population in there. And yet the kids that are neighbors of those are in schools that needed to be taken over in the city of Providence. So this all relates back. So my feeling is that there's these short-term strategies you need to really be focused on. Keeping our businesses alive is a top priority right now. Keeping our residents safe and doing whatever we can do. But we need to look at a more long-term strategy. This should show us a lot of our weaknesses, and that we can actually strengthen on. And that education one is going to become a very strong discussion point for me, in the coming weeks.
Lieutenant Governor, do you think COVID-19 has given us a unique opportunity to go back and revisit possible regionalization of schools or services throughout the state?
So I think the most important thing there, Ryan, is do you have a structure that can help kids learn at higher levels than they're currently learning? And do you have a structure? I tell you, one of the things that I think is going to happen here is that this virtual learning that's going on, teachers are going right into families' homes, just like you're into my office at my house right now. They're going right into the families' homes. They're going to have direct contact with the parents in a way that they haven't had in the past. Let's take advantage of that, right? Let's inform. One of the things that I think needs to be done, even more so than regionalization, quite frankly, is we need to be honest with our families. 84% of the families think their kids send their kids to really good schools, and we know that's not true. On average, the reading proficiency and the math proficiency in our schools is significantly lower than heck, we got school districts with 8-10% proficiency. So the regionalization is a good conversation, and we've regionalized the mayoral academies in a way that made a lot of sense to me. And I think we have lowered some costs by doing that. But the highest priority is it's not even building a Fenway Park so the kids can go to school in a fancy building. Our focus should be, how do we increase the outcomes for the families in terms of the kids' performance so that their economy changes over a decade or more, and that when we're faced with the next crisis like this, we don't have to be talking, as Frank was saying earlier, in terms of income levels that are impacting families. Either they go to work or they don't have food on the table. So we can increase people's earnings through the education. And my focus would be more on, show me a plan that can increase the outcomes for our kids and the outcomes for the families. And if you make it a priority on other areas that seem to be, easy talking points, you're going to miss that, Ryan. And I think that's the focus. So if you can figure out a way, if regionalization, I don't think it's just saving money at this point in time, which there's some money that potentially could be saved. It's, if it doesn't increase the ability of these kids to learn, all our kids, regardless of where they live, then we're basically chasing a rabbit that we'll never catch.
Lieutenant Governor, get back to reopening. The number one thing I'm hearing, and I'm sure you're hearing, is the unknown. We're living in a world of unknown. There are businesses like lodging, hotels, short-term rentals have no idea when they could start taking reservations. A lot of businesses are looking towards Memorial Day. I just got a bunch of emails sent to me. Memorial Day weekend reopening seen for New Hampshire. Vermont is taking steps. Mass is taking steps. Businesses not knowing if they'll be able to be open by Memorial Day, and then hotels not knowing when they'll be able to take guests. Any insight or anything you can tell them to kind of calm their nerves for at least a few minutes on this Wednesday?
Yeah, so I'm going to be talking to, I think, 25 or 30 different owners that have rental property, summer rental property. I think it's calls tomorrow. I'll certainly have a little more insight of what they're thinking of and what their solutions are. I mean, we're still in this space where there's a 14-day quarantine if you're coming from out of state. So how practical it is for somebody to come in and they're going to stay a week and then have to be quarantined the whole time. So this is where the flexibility comes in, Ryan. This is where I think you need to really have serious conversations, as you were alluding to before, by industry and segments of that industry. So, we're talking to people around the state in terms of the hotel issues, cancellations coming in. They may have taken a night prepayment, right? And how are they going to pay that back if they actually don't have the funds to do that because they're anticipating that people are going to be coming? So that uncertainty is a real problem. I'm interested in meeting with the tourism councils as well, and talking to them about what's their strategy. How are you going to do that in a way that's safe and flexible? So I think those unknowns are still out there, and I don't really have the answers for those. But I would think that we're pretty imaginative, innovative our businesses are. I mean, we got one business down in your neck of the woods that's going to start a delivery service for restaurants. I was on the phone with Anthony yesterday, and he's going to lower the cost significantly over the national networks that are delivering food. We're going to be innovative, I would think that you're going to have more and more people, if it's structured right and priced right, you're going to have a lot more people in Rhode Island that potentially will take advantage of these summer rentals, in a way that they'd be supportive. There's people who can afford it. They would be supportive, just like I'm asking them on rismallbusiness.org. If you can afford to buy a certificate in advance, go buy it, right? If you can afford to, your vacation has been changed. You may not be going to wherever you go, Maine or New Hampshire or out of state, really shift your thinking and vacation here in Rhode Island. So that, if you're living in, you want to get onto the ocean side of things, rent a place down in Newport. Rent a place that is not being rented because of the quarantine right now. Rent it for a longer period of time, so that the owner of the facility, it doesn't have to do the cleansing, after every 2 days, 2-day stay. Have a month stay, have a 3-week stay. Our family is looking into that right now, to be supportive of our local small businesses in a way that we can, manage. But anywhere that the message I would deliver to people who listen to this, that have the ability to support our small businesses, those tourism destinations that rely on out of state, the percentages are very high. It's like I heard them yesterday. Close to 80% of those rentals come from out of state. We need to figure out a way to have our in-state people there, and they may have to incentivize some of that, right? To just do that, that survival strategy. There's a price point where they can pay their bills. There's a price point where they make a profit. And right now, I know a lot of the small businesses are just looking at the price point where they can just pay their bills so that they are, they survive this. So I would see that there's a great deal to be done, but I would be talking to the people in Rhode Island. Support our small businesses, support them in a way that you can. And there's many ways you can do that. And one of them is when you talk about the rentals issues that you just talk about tourism, Ryan, right? It's not just the money that somebody spends when they go and rent the house. It's the money they spend locally with the restaurants and the other different amenities that they take advantage of. If you have out-of-state people coming in and renting, and they have the quarantine, then they're not going to be able to get out, even in the local retail stores that'll be properly, safety, set up. So yeah, we're going to need to, and I think it's a function of the media as well. Thank you for having me on today, and Frank has had me on and as well. But I'm really surprised that, quite frankly, that our office has not received more media attention on the really important work that we're doing and the questions that you're asking right now. I think the media can play a very important role in terms of the recovery. If they actually are really continually talking about, supporting our small businesses in a way that, we haven't normally done. And I think that's the story. It's the health story, but the reopening is the real story right now for the reasons you just talked about.
And I'm going to, Frank, I'm going to let you jump in 1 minute. It just goes directly with that. I've had Evan Smith, Executive Director of Discover Newport on, as well as Rhode Island Hospitality on. We all talked about it. I'm going to keep this campaign going. 2020 is the summer that you rediscover your backyard, you rediscover Rhode Island. Instead of going somewhere else for vacation, you're going to be in Rhode Island. So I've been encouraging everybody to make a bucket list of 20 items to do during the summer of 2020 here in Rhode Island. And maybe it's a ice cream shop that you haven't been to since you were a kid, or a beach that you haven't been to. What is one thing that would be on your list that you're going to do this summer?
Thanks, Ryan, for saying that. And then we had met with Evan about an international strategy for Newport in January, which is clearly on hold right now, with bringing weddings in from outside the country into Newport. So I think his point is right on target. The thing I would do is, again, I would go back to that rismallbusiness.org. And when we meet with the rental owners, we're going to say, register your business there. Register the fact that you've got, places that you could rent. Register your business there in terms of the type of things that we want. To echo your message, Ryan, that is going to be this portal, and it's an interesting one because we have small businesses volunteering their time, almost like a nonprofit executive board, to really maximize the small businesses. in a way that our local chambers have, like Frank says, but we're listing all our local chambers. I really would push people to that site, and then and there's a place where you could send people and say, hey, pick 20 of these small businesses that you would normally do business with, or you haven't done business with it, and go and do business with them.
So I'm going to rephrase Ryan's question, because all that government stuff is great and it's great resources. But you as a forget you're your lieutenant governor for a minute.
Okay, let's forget.
All right, and where is it in Rhode Island? What place in Rhode Island would you like to go and explore? That one thing that you haven't done. That one place you want to go to. I'm not talking about a particular business, just a particular destination. This is the the beaches down.
A day trip with your family or something like that.
Yeah, where would you go? Where would you explore?
So now I live in northern Rhode Island, right? So I would go outside of northern Rhode Island, so to discover, things maybe in South County or that type of thing, or maybe I get a reservation on that bikeway that's along the railroad tracks that's down there. Maybe they got the seating structured in a way where I could have my family do that activity in that area. And I would encourage, along the same line, I would encourage people who live in other parts of the state to discover another part of the state. So either, come up to Blackstone Valley, take a look at the river, look at the Blackstone tourism, take a look at Slater Mill. If you live in another part of the state and you think that everything comes to you because it's like the vacation spots, no. What you're suggesting, Frank, is somebody in Westerly head up to the Slater Mill in Pawtucket, right? And somebody in Pawtucket head down to the drive-in theater, and taking a drive-in theater down in Westerly with the Musqueamicut Business Association, where that falls right in line with what I've been saying as Lieutenant Governor, that there's 39 cities and towns, and every community is important, and the people who live in those communities are important. So that'd be my message. If you don't consider yourself the destination spot, pick a destination that you don't normally go to, and in Rhode Island, there's many places that you can go to up in Blackstone Valley. I mean, we have a national park corridor here right in Blackstone Valley. So I know my area pretty well, but I also know the other areas of the state. I think one of the things that I really want to do is I met down in Newport, the people who are doing that rail bike thing. I can't remember the exact name of it.
Rail Explorers.
Yeah, so I can see myself going down there and participating on that in a safe way, and then figuring out a way to do a little retail shopping in Newport or Middletown or in that area, because I don't live in that area. But that's what I would be saying, Frank. I would be looking at Rhode Island as a whole state, places that you haven't normally gone to. Take a look at what's out there, and then actually visit those places.
We've got a lot of these historic little houses, the Gilbert Stuart birthplace, the Babcock House down in Westerly, Smith Appleby House up in Smithfield, the Eisenhower House down in Newport. All these places that people, it's not a priority for them to go out and see because they live here or they don't even know about it. And Smith's Castle down in North Kingstown. A goal of mine, I don't know whether it can happen, is to visit each one of those and learn about the history of these incredible places. And just kind of a fun thing. It's spent an hour or two just learning about these small little houses throughout Rhode Island. They're pretty remarkable. You got
a museum in Woonsocket that talks about the working culture of the
area. Working culture, sure.
Right, there's a phenomenal place there that is run by a great board up there. So yeah, Frank, I think your idea is a good one. So I'll be Lieutenant Governor now. Steal your idea, because I think what you're talking about is really prompted a thought in my, and quite frankly, is that and what Ryan's saying is let's really support Rhode Island. That's what we're working on that small smallbusiness.org, and to do that, let's visit Rhode Island. So
Dan, you can make it your idea, because I know that the art of invention is never disclosing your source.
I always do. So Frank, you're going to be. In fact, I'll be calling you to potentially be one of those volunteers that can help make that happen. I'd love to have you in that conversation.
The tagline could be Rhode Island, where everybody knows everybody, and everybody has been everywhere. That should be our tagline. Let's finish the everywhere this summer.
All right. Well, I'll get back to you offline, and we'll talk about that, as I'm doing with many of the people who really, want Rhode Island to do well. And I think that's a great concept. And I think that it feeds off the idea of supporting our economy. Because if you did travel to one of those houses and you were from a different part of the state, then you're gonna like Google, okay, where's a retail shop? You got that art, and I keep on forgetting the names, unfortunately. But and down in North Kingstown, you have this unbelievable art center, right? That got like all these artists in it, and then we visited. We're buying some glasswork right now with Mike down there. So you would discover some really interesting places, and you would be supporting the economy when you're out there traveling, because you're going to get, when you get up to Woonsocket, you're going to find some pretty good fish and chips with your old fish and chips, and other places up in Woonsocket area, just the same way you would do anywhere else. So I think it's a great idea, Frank and Ryan. We're going to feed off of that one.
That's great. I just have one more question that I want to throw out, and the thing that I guess I hear from business owners is a concern about when they reopen, whether or not it's going to cost them more to reopen than to stay closed, number one. And number two, that what they need to rebuild with their clients, not necessarily their relationship, but because of this virus, they have to find a level of trust where people can feel comfortable walking into a place and feel that they're safe. And I think that's going to be the big challenge.
Consumer confidence.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's why I think that the following the guidelines that have been set up by the health department, Dr. Scott, and also the governor's message is going to be key to building that confidence. And then also that question you just asked, Frank, is that will they be able to pay their bills if they do open up? Will it cost them more to open up than not open up? Those are all evaluations that the business owner needs to make. But I'm going to go back to where I've said multiple times, the state and the local municipalities cannot totally rely on the federal dollars as being the solution here in Rhode Island. The state and our local communities need to think a lot bigger. And I need to repeat the way I feel about that, but they need to think a lot bigger. So that, for instance, that business, is it more important for that local community to have the business operating and they are not breaking even, say, and actually contribute so that they can just basically open up and be there and so that they're going to be there when this is all over? I think it is. As a mayor, if I had the ability, Frank, right, to support a state guaranteed program using some of the CARE money as leverage to go to the local banks, all the banks, get them to do more than they would normally do in a small business loan because of the circumstances. And if I was asked as a local leader, if I wanted my businesses in my town to participate in a program like that, and it required me as a community to get the town council to approve a portion of those guarantees, I'd do it.
Lieutenant Governor, go on, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I would just say that thinking is not there yet. And to answer your question, Frank, businesses who can't afford to open up and it costs them less to stay closed than opening up are not going to open up.
And to go with that question, to give people an example, this is just one question I got. And I think it gives an idea of what people are thinking, but also I'm sure you can provide resources for businesses that are thinking this way. Restaurant owner says, I heard from one of my sales reps that when we reopen for inside dining, we could use shower curtains in place of plexiglass to separate tables. Is there any validity to that? And does that omit the 6 foot, 8 foot social distancing between tables? So where should people go when they have questions like that? I don't know if you know the answer. If you know the answer.
Yeah, so they should go to our, one place they can go to our office for sure. They can call us at 222-2371. And also they can, email us at the at the LTGOV .ri.gov. So, and then they can go to DBR, who has set up a portal for businesses to present their business model. My caution to people would be, don't spend the money until you have it verified that that's going to be an acceptable strategy. We already have some small business. I have a video from a hairdresser that said, I've gone in, I spent the whole weekend, I got the plastic guards up between the chairs, I got the sanitation here. But if that doesn't work in DBR's mind, the Department of Business Regulation, then you kind of expended resources and time. So, but that goes back, Ryan, that question that just was asked. For instance, we're talking to some golf courses right now that now they can use the carts for that revenue, about putting a divider between the seats. Does that allow them to put, to rent to two people at a time rather than one person at a time, so that they might be able to be breaking even? The same question that was asked on the restaurants. They have these ideas. I think every idea needs to be vetted. Frank's point, your point earlier about having these businesses in the conversation. Part of the things that we're going to be doing on our calls Tuesdays and Fridays is putting businesses on to express what they think is a safety measure that's not being considered right now, so that at least now it's public. It has to be digested by the decision makers. That would be one of them. So if that restaurant owner wanted to contact our office, or he felt comfortable with you giving me that information offline, we'll contact him.
We'll do that.
That would be great.
I guess we'll leave it. Frank, did you have anything else?
No, I think we've got the Lieutenant Governor on for a little over an hour. He may have business to do.
He might have business to do.
I got to go talk to some people, but I'm going to be back to you. Our office is going to be back to both of you on what did we call it, Ryan?
Rediscover RI.
Rediscover RI. Okay.
Lieutenant Governor, one last, we could leave it on this.
Yes.
Greatest resource for business owners out there, greatest resource for consumers, and any upcoming calls or videos that you want to promote.
Yeah, so businesses, I think the commerce is a good resource. Our website, that you can just Google the Lieutenant Governor of Rhode Island, get to our website. We're posting up information every day that is real critical information. And if you're not able to get to DLT on an unemployment question, we can get it to them. If you're not able to get the DBR on a question that like the restaurant owner just asked, we can get that answer to you. So we're functioning as that information center. So in small business things, besides commerce and other places, and the chambers and that type of thing, use us as a resource.
Excellent.
You might want to promote your Facebook Live thing you're doing tonight.
Yeah, the Facebook Live thing tonight's going to be an interesting one, because we're going to have a Lieutenant Governor from Michigan, who is a really sharp young man, and the Lieutenant Governor from Delaware. And we're going to have a conversation about reopening strategies, in our respective states, and talking about the impact that the virus had. And then right after that, we're going to have a session with some community leaders from the Black community, talking about the impact that the COVID-19 has had on their community, which I think is really important for us. So it should be 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock, and you can just go to our webpage, and you can get it through our Facebook feeds or through our Twitters, and then it's being shared out too. So we encourage everybody to show up, share it out, and join in. And if you have questions that are related to the topics, then fine. If you have questions that are unrelated, ask your questions, and we'll definitely get back to everybody with an answer.
Excellent. Well, Lieutenant Governor, I want to thank you for taking so much time with Frank and I today. And we appreciate it. We know you're a busy man, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Like I said, we're going to get back to you. I'm going to go to work now. That's a good question. I consider this work, even though you told me I wasn't Lieutenant Governor during the call, Frank. That's okay.
There you go. All right, Lieutenant Governor, thank you. And Frank, that was a good conversation with Lieutenant Governor. Any last takeaways or thoughts?
No, I guess just I'm concerned that there appears to be a lack of communication between the governor's office and the other general officers. These people are elected. They all bring a different perspective. I know the lieutenant governor has had a closeness with the business community. I would think that they would have something relevant. It just sounds like he hasn't spoken to her directly in weeks, and that baffles me.
Yeah, it certainly does. A lot of great resources out there, and we'll follow up on a lot of what the Lieutenant Governor told us today. So look for stories and content up on whatsupnuke.com. You'll see follow-up podcasts. You'll see follow-up videos. You'll see follow-up stories. Follow-up. We're our team of contributors will follow up with some of the things you heard today, and of course, we're keeping you updated 24/7 with new news and information and data. It is changing just about every day. What the Lieutenant Governor said today, it will probably he might know a little bit more tomorrow, or what he said today might change by tomorrow. So some of those websites that he shared with us today, well, first of all, his is ltgov.ri.gov. And then he really talked a lot about and promoted a lot rismallbusiness.org, and great resource. And yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. I too am surprised. I don't think many people looking at some of the questions from some of our readers that are popping up. I'm not sure many people understand the role of the Lieutenant Governor and what he or she is responsible for on a daily basis. So I think when people hear that Lieutenant Governor and Governor aren't together in the same room every day, they might be looking at it kind of as president, vice president.
They're elected separately. If you look at the history of the position, each lieutenant governor has made it what it is. There's really no agenda, if you will. It was when Joe Garrahy was the lieutenant governor, it was a part-time position in Rhode Island. It was made into a full-time position, and many people believed that would make it easier for Joe Garrahy to run for governor, which he did, and he won. And it was really a not very well-defined position. Each lieutenant governor has brought their own personality and has brought their own issues to it. Good resources. We've had some very good people who have served as lieutenant governor and also elected separately. I think that's one of the keys that I think the lieutenant governor was saying. It as we do on a presidential level, we elect a president and a vice president as one ticket. In Rhode Island, we elect all of our general officers separately. So there is no political, they're of the same political party, but no real political connection between the two.
We'll bang through a couple questions here because people are just sending them in and they may not have been able to watch this full hour and 11-minute video. Let's see here. Sarah Beth says, guidance for hotels, bed and breakfast, and Airbnbs. And Sarah Beth, the lieutenant governor as well as the governor has said from up until the 22nd of May, which is quickly approaching, it feels like, that there is a 14-day quarantine order. I think Lieutenant Governor said that he is going to be on a call with all sorts of short-term rental owners and hotel owners. Right. Details hopefully to come. Is that how you took that, Frank?
Yeah, that's exactly how I took it. Bottom line is they don't have an answer right now.
That is. Let's see here. Trailblaze, Rediscover RI, love it. Let's see. Let me go to the top and work down here. This is a very long one.
Now, there are a lot of words.
The way the funds were distributed is very illogical. How will the state's response be different? We need a scalpel to fix these problems. What I would say to a question like that is, unlike the pandemic, there wasn't a playbook in Rhode Island for how to deal with this. And they are working with what they have day by day to come up with how to best serve. We have another question here about unemployment, and you got to trust them sometimes at their word that they're doing what they can to get it up and running and help as many people as possible.
I will tell you that I've at least interviewed a couple of times Scott Jensen over at Department of Labor and Training, and have been incredibly impressed. So when it comes to questions like that, perhaps that's the place to go to get the answers, is to call over to DLT and ask them. They are very competent and put in some really good programs.
Copper Pig says the lack of communication about when small businesses can reopen is appalling. If you're just catching this, didn't catch the answer earlier, I brought up this point is the lack of unknown, of lack of uncertainty. And Lieutenant Governor says they're trying to put out as much information as they can when they know it.
And the unfortunate thing is that his office is not coordinated with the governor's office. So I don't know what information he puts out, what the governor puts out. I also share that same concern. It just seems to me that I know there's a lot of praise around the country for how we're reopening here, but it seems to be at best just skeleton advice to people as they go out, and some people don't know who's opening or who can open or how they can open or how they keep people out of the stores. I just, it's a lot more guidance is needed, I think.
And I don't think I'm trying to be cautious with my words here. We're not going to win a prize for being the first to reopen. And I think it is being brought up too often that we are the first state in the Northeast or New England to reopen. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't if, businesses, and stay-at-home orders and reopening looks different in every single state. So it's certainly not a competition because the competition is in the same between Rhode Island and Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont. It all looks different in each state. So we keep hearing almost every day from the governor or officers that, we're the first state to open. It doesn't, we're not going to win anything for it.
Doesn't matter. It's about safety. And you take a look at some of these countries that rush to reopen and is starting to see a spike number of cases and the number of deaths. I did want to relate to, they talk about this herd immunization or whatever they call it. And Sweden is the example of that. Sweden did not put any mandated restrictions on people. It was these were voluntary. Sweden's a whole different kind of society, and people in Sweden will often follow what's suggested. Most people in Sweden are members of unions. Most employers are members of employee groups that negotiate with these unions. So there's a very strong people orientation and expectation that people will follow. So this herd mentality, if you will, in Stockholm, the last I heard, which was a couple of days ago, only 23% of people who live in Stockholm have actually gotten the virus. Their death rate is double that of the United States, and their number of cases is fairly high, different than every other country around them. The flip side of that is New Zealand, where the prime minister, somebody's in her 30s, I believe, she shut down the country immediately. Maybe in a company too, but shut down the country immediately. And she took the position that they were not going to mitigate this virus. They were going to eradicate this virus. And so she took a little bit of heat for what she did. 5 weeks later, they started to reopen the country. And it's small. It's an island, 5 million people, 0 cases of the coronavirus. Now, that may have changed over the last couple of days, but their numbers were incredibly encouraging, even leading up to that reopening. That they had essentially, they were saying that they had eradicated the virus by being pretty strict about things, and they didn't care about what anybody else did.
We'll get through these next couple comments and questions rather quick because for those looking for the governor is up at 2:30 p.m. today. Brendan brings up a point. Why would the Paw Sox have access to small business when owned by people with a net worth of 8 to 10 billion? This money should be used for establishments who need it. So, Frank, you can answer this question. The status of a small business doesn't fall on what you are worth or what your owners are worth.
Number of employees.
Number of employees, and the Paw Sox certainly have less than 5,000 employees.
Well, it's 500. Small Business Administration defines a small business with less than 500 employees. The point is well taken. There have been public companies. There have been a number of public companies that are below that 500, or others who have found ways that have siphoned off billions of dollars in this early money to them. And those businesses of 8, 9, and 10 some of them have been left out in the cold. And one of the things they said about the initial grants was that it went to people who already had pretty strong relationships with banks, not to people who may not have had that. Somebody bootstraps their business and they open it up and they don't have to deal really a whole lot with a bank to be able to get that initial loan. They got left out in the cold because they didn't have that relationship.
Raymond brings up a point that I've brought up in the governor's press conferences a couple times, and it's another long one, but it pretty much points to the fact that 501c3s, which are Chamber of Commerce's as well as nonprofits, have not been eligible. I'm sorry, Chamber of Commerce's and Convention and Visitors Bureaus and nonprofits have not been eligible for PPP grants, loans, state services. Obviously, it's going to be important to have Chamber of Commerce's as well as Convention and Visitors Bureau help reopen Rhode Island and help jumpstart the community. I've been told that the governor has answered that question that I've asked her, that they're looking into how to appropriate money to support those organizations.
Yeah, I think just one quick thing. It's not a 501c3, but it's a 501. There's a different designation. Most nonprofits are 501c3, but chambers.
Yeah, I forgot the number.
Yeah, but you're right, and I've heard the same thing, that they're looking into it. But some of these chambers are in tough play. They employ people.
Yeah. Let's see here. Jonathan Perry, thank you, Ryan and Frank, he says, and our good friend over there at the Newport Playhouse and Cabaret Restaurant. I want to just let people know the governor's coming up at 2:30. We'll have that live for you on our Facebook page, YouTube channel, as well as on our website. That is at 2:30. Coming up at 6:30 this evening, we will bring you Newport City Council's regular council meeting, and we'll bring that to you on the same channels, Facebook, YouTube, as well as on our website. Some big things they're going to be talking about there are their 2021 budget, what to do about 4th of July fireworks with social gathering restrictions, and a few other items. So we have a full day of streams for you here. And of course, Frank, you've been bringing a lot of great audio interviews as well as a lot of good stories.
We've got one coming up tomorrow that we're going to be talking about the homeless with the executive director of the homeless group in Rhode Island. It's an incredible story, one well worth listening to, and we're going to do that. We're going to do that podcast at 11. It'll pop up later on the site, sometime maybe in the afternoon or evening.
Excellent. Well, Frank, I want to thank you for the time, and we'll be reading you soon.
Thank you. This is good.
All right. We will talk to you later. Thank you, everybody, for watching.